If I would have had Anarchy Audioworx when I was still in nappies, I'd be a gazillionaire by now.
Don't tell you I'm not average. Spread butter on a boy like a sandwich. LB on a musical rampage. Been a response for collateral damage. Tell me no response for the weekend producer.
Greetings one and all, this is Lloyd Brown and welcome social media family to Lloyd Brown Music, and this is going to be a very bumper edition of Weekend Producer because I'm going to be featuring all of Anarchy Audioworx's plugins. I'm just going to give an overview of all of the plugins that are on offer via their website. They are my sponsors and I'm going to be doing a bumper edition for you all today. I don't know how many parts this is going to consist of, but nonetheless, they will all be featured. So without further ado, I just want to give you the test music that I'm going to be utilizing alongside the overviews of the plugins involved. And here we have yet another plugin entitled Beef, provided by the gents at Anarchy Audioworx. Now, Beef, by my definition, is simply a multifaceted plugin that provides filters, distortion, saturation, bit crush, tube emulation, dynamic processing and wave shaping, therefore giving any audio signal its own unique sound. It can be used in subtle and exaggerated ways. And it's pretty much that. It doesn't do any more than that. It just gives any sound you put into it a distinctive sound that you can mold from many different presets and of your own settings as you choose. Now, as always, I'm going to go into the interface. So if I click the gears icon, which is the settings icon on the top left hand side, it will give me the usual blurb as to the developers and the hyperlinks that you can more or less click on to get the relevant information, and also the resize function right there. Okay, so let's come out of that and let's go into the presets dialog menu. So when I click on that, it will give you the, let's say, barbecue analogy where the sounds are concerned. So it gives you 13 presets ranging from instant beef, rare, medium, well done, filet, sirloin, rump, T-bone, ribeye, tomahawk, sizzler, belly buster. You know the crew. So if you want your sounds to be subtle, then you click on medium rare, etc, etc, etc. You know how that goes already. All right, but I'm not going to go into the presets. I'm going to start from its initialized state. All right, so there you have the floppy disk icon where it gives you the opportunity to save it. And I think if you press on here, it will scroll through the different settings that are there. Okay, so let's just stay on the initialized state for now. Okay, so on the top section, we have from left to right, we have got the heat and we have the mix function. We have a list of waves that we can use, which if I click onto that, it will give me a linear wave, a tan wave, tan H wave, sine wave, a sine H, saturate, square, square root, and curve. So for now, I'm going to keep it on the saturate because I find that this gives me the best example of how you can manipulate the sound with the instrument that I'm going to put the plugin on. Okay, so you got the bias left and you got the bias right, which will either give you more emphasis to the left channel or the right channel. At the bottom, you got the sizzle, which basically is the bit reduction. Okay, so you got from 0 bits to 14 bits. All right, and then you have the mix button, and in the middle you got the amount, which is just basically the amplitude button, and on the bottom right you got the low cut and the high cut. Okay, so let's just turn everything to 0 and keep the bias left and the bias right up. I'm going to play the drum loop and also include a pick guitar. Now, the drum loops, synth effects are taken from respectively the 1 gigabyte of free samples that you can get, and also some sounds taken from Synth Essentials as well. Let's just basically play that, and also a pick instrument that I used out of Hallion Sonic. It's got nothing to do with Anarchy Audioworx, but I decided to put this in because it has the best tonal qualities to give examples of what this plugin can do. All right, so let's just play a little bit of the rhythm. Okay, so that's the general rhythm that I've got there, but it is the actual pick that I am going to feature. And I just want to solo this so you can get to grips with the sound that I'm going to be affecting in this overview. All right, so here's the pick. And that's pretty much the sound that we're going to be concentrating on. But for it to be in any context, I want to utilize all of the other sounds that were featured before. Okay, so right now we're going to start with the heat button. And as you can see, when I start adjusting the values, it will change the wave from, I would say, from a triangle wave to a square wave. But then you won't really hear the effect until it's mixed in. All right, so let's just play with that a little bit and see how that functions. Okay, so we kind of established what kind of a sound that gives you. So let's just cycle through the wave presets and see what kind of sounds we get with the rest. All right, let's go. Okay, so that's a variation of what sounds you can basically get from putting the heat on, as it were. So let's just keep it on saturate for now and bring it close to a square wave. All right, so with the bias left and the bias right, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. It basically shows you where the effect is going to be prominent in the audio signal. Yeah, it does what it basically does with the bias left and the bias right. Okay, so going down to the bottom left hand side, you have got the sizzle, and the sizzle basically relates to the bit crushing scenario. As you can see, once I click here, it gives you from 0 bits to 12 bits. All right, so let's just play the rhythm again and work that button. But it would actually work a whole lot better if you actually put the mix on as well, Lloyd. Okay, let's start again. So you can definitely hear the bit crushing in that to its extreme. All right, so that's basically that. So I can turn those down now. All right, the amount basically is the amplitude. So let's just play that. Yep, does what the button suggests, increases the amount of amplitude. And on the bottom right, we've got the low cut and the high cut, which is kind of like, it's a long-winded tilt function. Cuts the low end, cuts the high end. All right, let's run it. And when I say long-winded, I'm not saying that out of any disrespect, but in comparison to the Anarchy comp, which does the tilt function more or less in the same way, but you use fewer buttons to do so. Whereas with this, you can use it in a more surgical way, I think, with these two buttons basically right here. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much that. There's just so many ways and permutations and parameters to this plugin that you can utilize this on any sound. I mean, not only, the pick, but vocals and kick drums, anything, any audio source you want to put through this plugin, you can literally just mangle the sound and customize your own sounds and have that just popping in your mix. You know what I mean? Beefing up your mix, pardon the pun. And that is Beef by Anarchy Audioworx. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, in the laboratory again with yet another plugin courtesy of Anarchy Audioworx entitled LFO Pro. And LFO Pro is simply a 6 LFO multi-modulation effect, an easy sidechain ducking for volume, bass frequencies and high frequencies, as well as 2 global filter LFO modulators and a pan LFO modulator. Now all 6 LFOs can run in sync together or independently from each other on different timings to create evolving textures and interesting rhythms. Its ability to duck the volume, bass frequencies and high frequencies makes automatic sidechaining a breeze and can achieve everything from intense volume pumping to focus and transparent rhythm frequency carving. Now, by layering the gated or sidechain sound with the 2 independent filter LFOs and the pan LFO, you can construct wide, complex and flowing sounds out of anything effortlessly with just a few clicks. For each modulator, you can choose from a list of waveform shapes for the LFOs to follow, as well as fully customizable shape templates for you to make your own. Combining all 6 LFOs, running them in sync, or experimenting with all 6 running on different shapes and timings at the same time is a surefire way to come up with amazing new sounds and rhythmic ear candy for your productions. Now that is the blurb coming from Anarchy Audioworx in relation to LFO Pro, and I'm sure you've been hearing the acronym LFO being used a lot. Now for some people, they don't even know what an LFO is, so I'm just going to tell you real straight what an LFO is, courtesy of Wikipedia. Now, LFO stands for Low Frequency Oscillation. Now, LFO is an electronic frequency which is usually below 20 Hz and creates a rhythmic pulse or sweep. This pulse or sweep is used to modulate musical equipment such as synthesizers to create audio effects such as vibrato, tremolo, and phasing. Now you know what's an LFO, Belle Biv DeVoe. All right, enough of the dry jokes. Okay, so we're going to go into the interface right now, and as you can see, it is a pretty chunky interface. It's got lots of things, but don't be thrown off by that. It is pretty intuitive once you get to know what each section basically does. All right, so we are going to go into the top left hand side, which basically caters for the low frequency ducking, and by pressing this section here, we'll actually turn it on and turn it off. And in the middle section, you've got the volume ducking section itself, which is the main hub of the whole plugin, which if you turn it on, it basically lights up in red. And if you go into the top right hand side, you've got the high frequency ducking. And if you click on that, it will basically light up in green. So just to recap, low frequency ducking, blue. Volume ducking, red. High frequency ducking, green. Now, before we go any further, I must inform you that I have been in consultation with Anarchy Audioworx, and I did point out that if you didn't know that you were supposed to turn it on, it would appear like it's not working. So there needs to be indicators to show that it needs to be turned on and off. It needs to be bypassed or switched on, just so that people can be steered towards that and actually have a more tactile approach to the actual control system itself. But just by looking at it right now, it's like I didn't even know when I first had it that I needed to even click this section to turn the thing on. But then when I went down here and clicked on these, I had a funny feeling that it was to do with the low frequency ducking and the high frequency ducking, but I just needed confirmation because I saw another plugin that uses the same principle, which is WA Productions Dodge Pro. And they're very similar, but the main difference for me is the size. The size of Dodge Pro is pretty much smaller and it's a bit busy in my opinion, whereas with LFO Pro it's nicely spaced out. It looks more like a workstation more than a widget. It's how Dodge Pro looks to me anyway, and I get a more tactile experience basically utilizing the control systems on LFO Pro. All right, but with that being said, They have told me, and I can inform you right now, that that will be on a future update, where these buttons here will be lit up in the corresponding colors. So they won't be in red as you see here, they will be in blue for this section. All right, on this section they will be lit up green. Obviously for this section it will be lit up red. I mean, you can't really overstate it, you know, that people might not know that they need to turn stuff on, you know, but if they had an icon to basically steer you towards turning the thing on and off, that will be a lot more helpful. All right, so yeah, so these will be colored in blue, these buttons will be colored in green, and these buttons either side will be colored in red. So you can get an easy prompt, that's the word I'm looking for, an easy prompt to go to those control sections right there. With that being said, let's go down to the bottom section. We have the low pass modulation right here, which basically will modulate the low frequencies of the audio source, and it has a variety of waveforms that will basically cater to whatever you need. So you got the sine wave as a default setting, and if you click on that, you got the triangle, source, square, random, custom. Okay, so with custom you can basically just click on to create certain nodes on there and create your own wave form, as it were. All right, if you don't like the look of that, you can literally just go up in the middle and click the undo button to the point that you desire, and that's pretty much it. And it's the same thing that basically works across the 3 modulation panels down below here. But let's stay with the low pass filter modulation. So as I said, you got all the different waveforms here. You got the illustration of what the waveform basically looks like, and you have got the time signatures that you can choose how the waveform basically modulates. That's more or less it. You got the frequency, you got the resolution, you got the smoothness, and you got the amount. I will kind of show you exactly how that works in the volume ducking, because that will be more easier for me to do than to just basically do it across each modulation panel. All right, so let's go over into the pan modulation right here, and it's the same principle as the low pass filter modulation and the high pass filter modulation, where you have a waveform drop down menu and you have all the waves here that you can use. You have the time signature drop down or pop up, whatever you want to call it, selection right here. It doesn't look like you can create your own pan modulation. I might be wrong, I might be overlooking something here, but I'm sure you can, but I'll check it out anyway. So basically it's from left to right or from right to left, depending on how you're looking at it. I think it's left to right to left here. All right, so that's pretty much what the modulation panels basically does in terms of low frequency ducking, high frequency ducking, low pass filter modulation, pan modulation, and high pass filter modulation. Now it's kind of easy to show you what it does in terms of the smoothness of the ducking and the amount of ducking that will apply to the smoothness and the amount of the modulation as well. All right, so I'm going to use the viola sound, which goes a little something like this. Okay, so that's pretty much that, right? So what I'm going to do, as with the other plugin that I used the pick with, I'm going to put some rhythm on there as well, so it doesn't sound too boring, because you're going to hear this for quite a bit. All right, so let's just play it with the rhythm behind it. All right, that sounds good. Right, so what we're going to do right now, we're going to go into the middle section and turn the volume ducking on, and then we are going to utilize these two controls here, the smoothness and the amount, and also the modulation speed as well. All right, so let's just play with that. Bearing in mind, this is in its initialized state. All right, there's no preset set to this at all. All right, so let's do this. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the volume ducking in a nutshell. And that is basically the brains of the whole outfit, all right? And what the brain does here is basically replicated in each module of this entire plugin. So it works on the same principle, all right? So going into the low frequency ducking, it works in the same way, right? Where it only ducks the low frequencies, as you can see right here. So the frequencies between here and here, that's what gets cut out. And the smoothness and the frequencies are basically altered from here. Okay? The amount can be as little or as extreme as you want it, and the smoothness right here. So to demonstrate further, let's basically play it. Okay, so it's the same principle as the volume ducking section that is used for the low frequency ducking right there. Okay, so if I want to use that, I can use that. If I don't, I can just basically switch it off and it doesn't affect the overall sound that comes out. Like I said, all 6 modules can work independently of each other. So they all can work together, or they can just basically work separately and do its own thing if you like. All right, so moving from the low frequency ducking to the high frequency ducking, it's basically the same thing, but all it's ducking is the high frequency. So if I click on this icon here, it's the very same thing, but a different color and a different frequency range. All right, so let's go into it. Oh, and I forgot to mention as well that you can actually click on the waveform and create nodes here as well to create your own custom waveform in the ducking section itself. Let's see how that sounds. So already you can see that the possibilities are endless. And if you're not really happy with this overall waveform, if you like, you can literally just click the undo right here until you get it back to its original state. So that's the low frequency ducking and the high frequency ducking basically taken care of. All right. So without me just going into it any deeper, you can do so much in terms of putting your own custom waveforms by adding or subtracting certain nodes from each waveform that you create, and just give the low ducking modulation just a whole different rhythm from the high frequency. So you can actually create so many different rhythmic possibilities out of the one waveform, which is the viola that's basically going through it. And that's notwithstanding the usage of the low pass filter modulation. All right, so let's just turn these off and stay in the middle with the volume ducking for now. All right, so going into the low pass filter modulation. So this is going to work pretty much in tandem, in my opinion, with the low frequency ducking right there. So if we go into, the low frequency modulation, so all of these I think is going to be corresponding with the volume ducking, I think. Right, so let's see how that sounds. Gonna try it with the low frequency ducking now. In fact, you know what? Let me just put some different nodes on each, just to give it a little bit of variety. All right, so we put that on the low frequency, and we're going to put another set of nodes on the high frequency ducking. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that's fair to say that they're two different looking waveforms, right? Okay, so let's click on the high frequency ducking and let's modulate the speed at 8th note. So you got the 8th note high frequency and you got quarter note at the low frequency. All right, and the low pass modulation. So let's hear how this sounds. Okay, that sounds pretty unique. All right, so I'm just gonna bypass pan modulation for now. I'm going to the high pass filter modulation, and what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna actually click on that, and let's work this at let's see what we got. 1/16. Okay, so we got quarter note, low frequency, volume ducking. In fact, let's change that to half note. So you got quarter, half, 1/8, 1/16 on the high pass. Let's see, put this on. Yeah, put this on 1/8 as well. No, you know what? Put it on a triplet. Right. Let's see how that basically sounds. Yeah, it's almost pinching the sound now to the point where I can't really hear it. But it's just to demonstrate, you know, how subtle or how extreme you basically want it. Okay, now to even mangle the sound even more, now we're going to use the pan modulation. All right, so with the pan modulation, I'm just going to keep it at the sine wave. In fact, no, let me put it on a triangle wave and move it at half a note. Let's see how that sounds. So I haven't used any amount or smoothing on the pan modulation, on the high pass filter frequency modulation, or the low pass filter frequency modulation either. I've just basically just left it as is, but it just gives you some idea as to how you can mold the sound and the movement of the sound by using all of the modules, or 5 of the modules, or 4 of the modules, or 3 of the modules, 2 of the modules, or just the one volume ducking, side chaining volume. So in summary, LFO Pro is just one of those tools that can give a boring, droning sound so much life and movement within it that the possibilities are truly endless, and I absolutely love working with this plugin. LFO Pro is very comparable with WA Productions Dodge Pro, although they work differently, but they work on the same principle. The one thing that I do give LFO Pro over Dodge Pro, number 1 is the size. Number 2 is the spaced out controls that you can just see and know what they are for. Whereas with the Dodge Pro is that everything is basically compacted into a widget sized plugin, which for me, there's a lot of guesswork. There's a lot of guesswork, even though with Dodge Pro, it is labeled as you hover over certain buttons and command, which is cool still. But I like something that's got a nice size to it, that's not too cluttered, and something that is very tactile to use. So having said that, next thumbs up again to Anarchy Audioworx with LFO Pro.
We can produce